Greetings. I am Olga Piszczanska, Chairwoman of the Accounting Chamber of Ukraine. Within the framework of the SAI WGEA Global Cooperative Audit, we assessed the National Disaster Risks Management System and provided the government with recommendations aimed at enhancing public safety and strengthening the country's resilience. Over the past decade, the average annual temperature in Ukraine has increased by 1.2 degrees, which is higher than the global average. The warming has led to noticeable climate changes. Severe droughts cause significant economic losses, damage crops, and trigger large-scale fires. Between 2019 and 2023, around 7,000 fires resulted in losses amounting to nearly €500 million. Heavy rainfall and flooding also caused significant damage to infrastructure. While in the past heavy rains and floods did not cause loss of life, we are now recording incidents resulted in fatalities. On the 30th of September 2025, in the city of Odessa, 10 people, including one child, lost their lives as a result of abnormal rainfall. Ukraine has developed specific methodologies and strategic frameworks for assessing climate risks. However, our audit revealed that the lack of a unified system for assessing such risks limits the country's forecasting and emergency preparedness capabilities. Moreover, climate vulnerability assessments have been conducted in only 7 out of 24 regions of the country. We also found that regional emergency response reserves were funded at an average of only 60%. While sectoral reserves had not been established at all. To enhance resilience to climate risks, we recommended in particular to establish a centralized data platform for risk management, modernize early warning systems, introduce a unified methodology for risk assessment, and allocate dedicated budgetary resources for disaster prevention. In response to the recommendations of the Accounting Chamber, the procedure for monitoring emergencies was approved, and the national automated alert system was modernized. At the same time, the tragedy in Odessa highlights the need for continued oversight of the implementation of these recommendations. Despite the challenges of war, we continue our work, so that our experience can serve not only Ukraine, but also those who are looking for effective ways to protect people and nature.
The Comptroller General of the Republic of Chile participated in the Global Cooperative Audit on Climate Change Adaptation, an international action led by the SAI Development Initiative, IDI, and its Working Group on Environmental Auditing, WGA. In Chile, this audit assessed the work of the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response and the Ministry of Health in reducing risks of disasters and adaptation to climate change in the context of extreme heat. Over the past 60 years, temperatures have risen across various regions of the country. Today, 90% of the population lives in urban areas exposed to heat waves, droughts, and wildfires, risks that directly impact people's health and quality of life. For this reason, the audit examined how regional risk reduction plans are developed, the extent of public participation, and the health system's capacity to respond to emergencies caused by high temperatures. The evaluations revealed significant gaps in the management of risk reduction related to extreme heat, such as the National Service for Disaster Prevention and Response, CENIPRD, did not incorporate climate change adaptation criteria into the regional risk reduction plans. The disaster risk reduction plans for the 16 regions in Chile, developed and updated nationwide between 2018 and 2022, did not include concrete actions or vulnerability assessments related to extreme heat, despite it being recognized as a threat to public health. Only the plans from the Chilean regions of Valparaiso and Los Rios refer to heat waves. Chile still lacks risk maps for extreme heat that identify populated areas exposed to this threat. Although a national emergency plan for extreme heat threats has been developed by SENAPERD, the Meteorological Directorate, and the Ministry of Health, MINSL, it requires adjustments to account for the diverse climatic conditions across the country. Furthermore, the Ministry of Health only began a pilot surveillance plan in 2024 to record the health impacts of extreme heat and assess the preparedness of its infrastructure. This initiative aims to generate epidemiological data to support decision-making in favor of protecting public health. Although Chile has a regulatory framework and has made recent progress, it is essential to continue strengthening climate risk planning and management. The Comptroller General of the Republic of Chile reaffirms its commitment to oversight, transparency, and the well-being of the population in the face of the challenges posed by climate change. Comptroller General of the Republic of Chile, overseeing the responsible use of public resources.
Supreme Audit Institution of Slovenia has just published the audit report on the efficiency of reducing the flood risks in the areas of significant impact of floods. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Spatial Planning and the Slovenian Water Agency were found to be partially efficient in flood risk management.
The main findings of the audit were that flood risk management planning has not been integrated enough. But since the agency has started preparing comprehensive sub-basin studies since 2020, there is hope that planning in the future will take into account whole river basins and that it will not only be a collection of data and projects planned on lower levels.
The agency is limiting urbanization in flood risk areas, but it is facing delays in doing so, and the latest floods have also shown that more restrictions are needed in this regard.
The state plans non-construction preventive measures by protecting natural floodplains and by adjusting land use. But there are still significant shortcomings in these areas, and much remains to be done.
Construction measures still prevail as the main preventive measure against floods, even though the non-construction measures are normally cheaper and should be used as a priority.
SAI of Slovenia has also found that when planning and implementing measures against floods, some progress has been achieved in the recent years. More consideration is now placed on climate change impacts and on following environmental objectives.
We proposed several recommendations aimed at improving the efficiency of flood risk management, and both of the auditees have already implemented measures to improve the situation.
La Auditoría General de la Nación participó de una auditoría cooperativa vinculada con la reducción del riesgo de desastres relacionados con el clima. Dos organismos que impulsaron este proyecto, la Iniciativa para el Desarrollo de INTOSAI, IDI, y el Grupo Específico de Auditoría Ambiental Internacional, INTOSAI WGEA, propusieron que fuera abordada por tres ejes transversales: gobernanza, eficiencia e inclusión. Aquí presentaremos los hallazgos y las recomendaciones respecto al eje inclusión, pero primero, algunos datos puntuales de esta auditoría. El objetivo auditado fue el examen de las políticas de la Secretaría de Agricultura, Ganadería y Pesca en la implementación del Sistema Nacional para la Prevención y Mitigación de Emergencias y Desastres Agropecuarios entre 2020 y 2023. Este sistema, regulado por la Ley 26.509, busca prevenir y/o mitigar los daños causados por factores climáticos, meteorológicos, telúricos, biológicos o físicos que afecten significativamente la producción agropecuaria, poniendo en riesgo de continuidad a las exportaciones familiares o empresariales y, por ende, directa o indirectamente, a las comunidades rurales. El sistema posee estrategias de prevención del daño y, en caso de declaración de emergencia, también de asistencia técnica y financiera y las de control y monitoreo. Los beneficiarios de este sistema son: 1. Productores agropecuarios afectados; 2. Productores más vulnerables; 3. Dependencias del Estado que desarrollan acciones para disminuir la vulnerabilidad de los productores agropecuarios y las poblaciones rurales. Durante el periodo auditado, se registraron un total de 230 convenios para prevenir y disminuir la vulnerabilidad de los productores agropecuarios y las poblaciones rurales. Puntualmente sobre el eje inclusión, se identificaron las herramientas implementadas para reducir los niveles de vulnerabilidad ante las situaciones de emergencia y/o desastre agropecuario, preparar a la población rural para actuar ante su ocurrencia y dar prioridad a los productores considerados como agricultores familiares. Los principales hallazgos son: 1. No se implementó el Registro Único de Productores Agropecuarios, herramienta necesaria para contar con información estandarizada e individualizar a los beneficiarios directos del sistema. Falta de mecanismos de identificación y priorización de pequeños productores y agricultores familiares que son los más sensibles ante las emergencias, dificultando así la aplicación del principio de equidad. 2. No se desarrollan de manera adecuada encuentros, capacitaciones o programas de preparación ante emergencias y desastres agropecuarios, lo que limita la resiliencia de la población rural. Ante esto, se recomendó: 1. Implementar un registro único de productores agropecuarios que permitan la sistematización de la información y evaluación del nivel de vulnerabilidad. 2. Reforzar las instancias de participación para garantizar programas integrales de prevención y reducción de los niveles de vulnerabilidad. Para conocer más sobre esta auditoría, se puede ingresar a www.agn.gov.ar.
Hi, my name is Marie-Pierre Condé, and I'm an acting principal at the Office of the Auditor General here in Canada. So very happy to talk to you about a recent report that we tabled in the spring of 2025 with regards to the National Adaptation Strategy. So in Canada, our climate has been changing drastically, and we see a widespread effect, including more frequent and more devastating extreme weather events, such as flood, forest fires, as well as heat waves. So it's impacting our community across our country, from the coastal citizen that see sea level rise, from our northern community that see changes in precipitation, in ice coverage, snow. So it is truly affecting our full population. On this screen, you can see that, and this is only a portion of the full cost of those weather events. It's been increasing significantly over the time, and you see major event that we faced. And in 2024, this reached the amount of over $8 million. So it is quite costly for Canadian. So a little bit about the National Adaptation Strategy. It was put in place by the federal government in 2023, and it had the goal of having a shared vision for climate resilience in Canada and really a whole of society collaborative approach to tackle adaptation. So it is a very important first step. However, it took a very long time to get there. If you see on the screen, the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development here at the Office of the Auditor General asked for a domestic plan back in 2006. So that was almost 2 decades before the strategy was put in place. And at the time, it was, when it was published, it was one of the last OECD countries to do so. And almost half the countries have already been reviewing their plan, at least once when that was done. So what we found was that there was quite a few missing elements to that strategy. If I start with the right, there's 2 out of the 3 components that were not put in place at the time of our audit, including the main pathway to address the Indigenous population's climate concern. So that is quite an important missing element. There's also key information that would inform decisions that were lacking or missing. There's no economic analysis and no prioritization of our domestic risk. But let's talk a little bit more about your subject, which was that you are addressing, which is data. So what we found was that the Canadian framework for monitoring and evaluation was not designed to measure progress. So in kind of the initial version, it was not tracking progress. And also, it was really lacking alignment. So for example, the action that was only on a single level of government, so only the federal action, were not linked to the indicators or the objective of the strategy. And when we looked at the main federal programming, it was very much a similar story where those programs and activities and action were not connected to strategy's objective or targets or indicator. So it's very hard for Canadian or decision makers to understand what is working, what is not working, and to take informed decision in terms of where action is needed to make sure that we have a more resilient country. So with that, I wish you an excellent conference.
Hello, I am Norwas Andi Ahmad from the Audit Board of the Republic of Indonesia, or BPK. Today, I'd like to share with you on the SAI's contribution in preserving environment through its audits. On this opportunity, I am pleased to share BPK's experience in conducting performance audit on climate change adaptation in Indonesia, forestry and land use sector and its lesson learned. Our audit focused on the period from 2021 to 2023. The audit aimed to assess how effectively our government in preparing its national adaptation plan and implementing actions to mitigate climate-related hazards like floods and landslides. There are several lessons learned gained from the audit, and we'll highlight 3 key points that are especially relevant to our SAI and WGA community, particularly regarding coordination, data, and financing. First lesson learned is regarding rooms to enhance coordination in the development of the National Adaptation Plan. We observed an opportunity to enhance alignment between the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and the Ministry of National Development Planning. Their different approaches to set priorities have resulted in some differing policy goals and budgeting. Fostering greater consistency would be very helpful for local governments, as they are seeking a clear national framework to finalize their regional adaptation plans. Second point, which is critical for data and monitoring, relates to our disaster vulnerability information system. The system currently provides a valuable assessment of vulnerability based on tabular data. We identified a significant opportunity to enhance its capabilities by also integrating spatial data. We believe incorporating elements like critical land maps or disaster-prone maps would provide a more comprehensive and precise evaluation of disaster risk. We see this as a key next step for strengthening the assessment. Finally, we looked at financing for our climate goals, specifically the NetSync 2030 plan. We identified a need for additional funding, and performance-based payments like REDD+ remain a promising source. Our review suggests there is an opportunity to enhance the utilization of these funds by streamlining some administrative processes. We also note that ensuring the timeliness of payments for verified emission reduction is a key factor. Addressing this would help unlock the full potential of REDD+ as a consistent and effective funding source for Indonesia's climate efforts. In summary, our audit highlights that for Indonesia to effectively adapt to climate change, we must improve ministerial coordination, urgently integrate spatial data into our risk assessment, and solve the administrative hurdles that are blocking verified climate finance. Thank you very much.
Pacific Island nations are on the front line of climate change. People in these nations experience the realities of climate change every day. The impacts are painfully real. Rising sea levels and temperatures, coastal erosion, saline intrusion, more intensive and frequent cyclones, droughts, flooding, and degradation of vital ecosystems, such as coral reefs. These effects of climate change have tangible impacts on the communities economies and development of Pacific Island nations. They result in displacement of people, loss of ancestral homes, health risks, food and water insecurity, and endanger children's futures. 9 government audit officers from the Federated States of Micronesia, Fiji, the Marshall Islands, New Caledonia, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu took part in the Global Climate Change Adaptation Actions Cooperative Performance Audit Initiative. This important initiative was spearheaded by the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, INTSAI, through the INTSAI Development Initiative and the INTSAI Working Group on Environmental Auditing. Individually, the 9 government audit officers examined the effectiveness of different aspects of their government's planning and actions to adapt to climate change. 4 examined the effectiveness of actions to adapt to sea level rise and coastal erosion. 4 examined the effectiveness of climate change adaptation planning and actions. And 1 examined the effectiveness of water resource management. These audits are highly pertinent given the real impacts of climate change in the Pacific. As the audits were done concurrently, together they provide a rich understanding of the challenges of adaptation action planning and implementation measures across the Pacific, and what is commonly needed for more effective adaptation actions. These audits also provide transparency for citizens and hold the relevant government agencies to account for the effectiveness of their actions to adapt to climate change in the Pacific. On the 2nd of October this year, PASAI published a regional report, Adapting to Climate Change, Building the Pacific's Future, bringing together the Pacific Island nations' challenges in effectively adapting to the realities of climate change that were identified in the 9 audits. These challenges bring with them the opportunity for more concerted and urgent action to safeguard and build the livelihoods of future generations. The messages from the audits are clear and consistent. Governments need to act now to ensure that they secure available financing and expertise for long-term sustainable solutions. Measures are better planned and targeted to where they are needed and can be most effective. Measures are implemented more effectively through more coordinated and inclusive action. And there is accountability for delivery of the intended outcomes through monitoring and reporting. Implementing climate change adaptation measures is not easy. It often involves complex and innovative solutions, depends on multiple parties coming together with common purpose, and requires substantial funding. Nonetheless, governments need to act with greater urgency and greater effect to ensure that investments are made to adapt to climate change and that these investments are significant and have enduring benefits. The Pacific Regional Report concludes that the time for more concerted action to adapt to the realities of climate change for people in the Pacific is now. Urgent, bold, and determined action is needed for more effective climate change adaptation in the Pacific. The Pacific is not alone in facing the challenges of adapting to climate change. More than 50 government audit officers from diverse regions across the world took part in the CCAA Cooperative Audit Initiative. These government audit officers included those in other small island developing states who are facing the same realities and race against time as in the Pacific. The global report prepared by INTSAI Development Initiative and the Working Group on Environmental Audit, Global Climate Adaptation Audits for a Resilient Future, Lessons and Recommendations from Supreme Audit Institutions, summarizes the findings from the audits worldwide. The global findings show that while the stakes and urgency may be higher in the Pacific and small island development states, the challenges of adapting to climate change are worldwide challenges. So the global report provides key messages to governments, international stakeholders, and supreme audit institutions. Looking positively to the future, the findings from the global audits show that real progress is possible when adaptation is approached systematically. This progress is needed now for the Pacific and small island developing states.